430, this is E5. We've got a bad leak at the wellhead on the Jeffcoat 110, number 4. Over.
M4E5, we'll notify the emergency team. Move upwind and block the area of leak on the rise. Over.
10-4, we'll secure the area.
The scenarios you've just seen highlight the need for each of us to be aware of the potential dangers of hazardous substances and to know how to respond in the event of an emergency. While most of us have little or no direct contact with hazardous substances, it is important that we all know what to do should an emergency arise. Because your worksite contains hazardous substances, you need to know what to do in the event of a spill, a release, or fire involving a hazardous substance. There are two levels of response to an emergency incident. First, recognizing the incident, and second, the actual control and containment and cleanup of the hazardous substance. Your role in an emergency situation is defined as a first responder awareness level. First responders at the awareness level are individuals who are likely to witness or discover a hazardous substance release and who've been trained to initiate a response sequence by notifying the proper authorities. The federal government has enacted a regulation known as HAZWOPER, Hazardous Waste Operations and Emergency Response, that applies to sites where hazardous substances have been or may be released. HAZWOPER affects employees who may discover or be engaged in emergency response operations involving the substantial threat of release of a hazardous substance. Should such a situation occur, the employees who could be most at risk are those who attempt to intervene without adequate training or equipment. This program is a part of your training necessary to protect yourself, your co-workers, and the environment in the event of a hazardous materials incident. Officially, you'll be qualified as a first responder awareness level under the HAZWOPER ruling. First responders could include virtually anyone: clerical or office employees, administrative or accounting personnel, warehouse workers, even security guards, anyone who could discover or witness the release of a hazardous substance. As a first responder, your first responsibility is self-protection, and this requires an understanding of the hazardous substances present in your workplace and an awareness of the potential dangers that could be present during a hazardous substance incident. A first responder must be able to recognize the presence of a hazardous substance in an emergency and, if possible, determine its identity only if it is safe to do so. The first responder must be able to recognize when assistance is needed and know how to get that assistance by notifying the appropriate emergency response agencies. In addition, you must understand the correct methods for securing the area, as well as your limited role as a first responder awareness individual. Let's take a moment to review what hazardous substances are and their associated risks. Any substances that have the potential to adversely affect the health and safety of overexposed employees or the environment are classified as hazardous. There are several broad classifications of health hazards. They are carcinogens, toxic agents, reproductive toxins, irritants, corrosives, sensitizers, and those substances which produce adverse health effects in specific target organs. Hazardous substances are listed by the Department of Transportation, DOT, Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, or the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA. These lists include a wide range of commonly used materials such as gasoline and cleaning solvents. During an emergency incident, a hazardous substance can be released from its container and thus pose a threat to your health. It's possible that just being in the vicinity of a spill or a release can put you in danger. For a chemical to cause harm, it must first enter the body. There are three major routes by which this can occur: by skin or eye contact, known as absorption, by inhalation or breathing, and by ingestion or swallowing. Let's look at some examples of potential exposures. In attempting to stop a liquid from spreading without protective clothing, the chemical could contact your skin and be absorbed. Skin contact can also cause burns or other irritations. Vapors from a spill or byproducts of combustion from a fire can be inhaled and cause an adverse health effect. To decrease the chance of ingestion, be sure to wash up thoroughly after contact with a hazardous substance to prevent possible contamination of food or drink. A particularly dangerous situation can occur when a gas is released. In many cases, a gas can cause you harm even before you're aware of its presence. In the scene at the beginning of this program, the engineer entered an environment where the presence of poison gas, in this case hydrogen sulfide, could have been fatal. Hydrogen sulfide has a distinctive rotten egg smell, but in high concentrations it will overpower the sense of smell. How did the engineer recognize the danger? This is the next major responsibility of the first responder, to know how to recognize the presence of a hazardous substance. Obviously, signs, labels, and placards provide visual indications of a chemical's presence. Any sign which contains the words danger, caution, or warning is a good indication that a hazardous condition could exist. All hazardous substance containers should have labels, signs, or placards identifying the product, the name and address of the manufacturer, as well as its potential hazard. The most easily recognizable markings on vehicles are the DOT placards that identify the substance and its hazard. Identifying the contents of a truck or rail car could also be accomplished by reviewing the shipping papers, waybill, or manifest. Information in these documents include the shipper's name and address, the receiver's name and address, and the proper shipping name of the substance. But reading or seeing is only one of your observation skills. Your senses of smell and hearing could alert you to danger. An unusual sound or smell could indicate an abnormal situation in the workplace. Take the time to observe your normal work environment. Look at the facility, listen, and smell the normal work operations. Knowing what's routine and what's not will help you recognize an emergency and enable you to take the proper action. Remember, your own health and safety come first. Do not approach a suspected leak with the purpose of identifying the substance, and do not attempt to rescue another person involved in a hazardous substance incident. Most work sites use or store some quantity of hazardous substances. You should assume that any spill, release, or fire is a hazardous situation and treat it with extreme caution. Your limited role as a first responder is detailed in your worksite's emergency response plan. This plan identifies who should be called in the event of an emergency, the lines of authority, safe distances and places of refuge, as well as site security and control. In some locations, you may have access to valuable information through the DOT Emergency Response Guidebook. It includes basic strategies for the initial stages of an emergency response. The guidebook contains suggestions for handling fires, explosions, health and pollution risks posed by the identified substance. Remember, you're only the first in a series of responders who will be involved in the various stages of an emergency situation. In most cases, a hazardous materials or HAZMAT team will perform offensive control, containment, and decontamination activities necessary to properly handle the emergency. These specially trained individuals may be equipped with survey instruments to identify and analyze the substances, and they have the knowledge to select and use the proper personal protective equipment to handle the emergency. Although your role is limited, it is vital in that you're responsible for initiating the emergency response sequence. Your duties are critical, as they may prevent the situation from getting bigger. As a first responder, it is your duty to recognize the presence of a hazardous substance and to determine its identity only if it is safe to do so. It is also your duty to protect yourself and others by securing the area from entry and to notify the appropriate emergency response agencies when necessary. Not all spills require an emergency response. Incidental or small releases of hazardous substances can be handled at the time of the release by employees in the immediate area, but only if the substance can be absorbed, neutralized, or otherwise controlled without fire or health risk. This means that a small overflow of a gas can or a leak of hydraulic fluid can be cleaned up without initiating an emergency response. However, if you have not been trained, or you are unsure of your ability to handle the situation, or you're unable to positively identify the substance, call for assistance. You are participating in first responder awareness level training because the site in which you work contains hazardous substances. Should you discover or witness the release of a hazardous substance, it is your responsibility to protect yourself and notify the proper authorities. The emergency response plan for your work site describes the procedure for emergency notification. Be alert to hazardous substances in your work area. Know when and who to call in an emergency. Remember, no matter what the size of the incident, your actions will not be effective if you yourself are injured. The first concern should be your own safety and the safety of those around you. The first responder is the key factor in preventing injury, loss of life, the destruction of property, and environmental damage. Being the first on the scene, you can make the difference between a minor incident and a major catastrophe.
We've shown a variety of workplaces and situations this month. We'd like to remind you that each workplace is different. Be sure to wear the personal protective equipment that's right for your job. For more information about Safety Watch, give us a call.